The REB Business Empowerment Showcase, shining a spotlight on the most innovative businesses that are helping principals, agents and property managers get ahead in their marketplace.
Hello and welcome to the Real Estate Business Podcast. I'm Emilie Lauer, Deputy Editor here at Momentum Media, and today I am joined by PRD Chief Economist Dr Diaswati Mardiasmo for a deep dive into data and how agents can utilize that said data to leverage local insights, win more listings, and capture a greater market share, especially in a low stock environment as we see it today. Asti, thank you so much for joining us.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I love being here.
And we love having you on the show, that's for sure, and looking forward to your expertise. Look, we've been talking about data for a couple of years now, or many years. Data has become one of those primordial aspects of the industry and real estate. How has the use of data changed over time, and to what are we reliant on it today in the industry?
Look, when it comes to data, I have to say that how it has been used before changes almost every 3 to 6 months, right? Because technological advances is just out there. You know, if you compare, say, for example, someone who is listing, selling, trying to get data, say 5 years ago, right? And it's more about knocking on the door of your peer, like your real estate person or, your office or whatever, and trying to find out, hey, what's happening in the market? What's the prices are going for right now? What sort of stock you have? You have to actually go in and ask what's happening in the market. Now, you just Google it, and without you even asking, AI and ChatGPT already comes in and already tells you that the median house price of Elizabeth Bay is so and so, and it's been growing for this much, blah, 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 and gives you a whole paragraph as to what's happening in that particular market. So the use of data has definitely changed so much based on the accessibility of data and what's available publicly. And that has changed the landscape, because the amount of times that, we might have done a report about, could be anywhere, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, saying this is the prices, this is what's happening, this is et cetera, and then literally someone who may not have any knowledge at all about the real estate market pulls out their phone or their tablet, keys in a few words and go, but this says so and so, right? And literally puts it in front of your face or in front of you and go, but this is what this is saying. So, how come what you're saying is slightly different? And what I'm seeing in the market right now is that high level, they need a high level of consistency in data. If there's even that slight discrepancy or difference, so say, for example, you might say that, well, I've been in the market for the past 10 years, what have you, this is my local area, median price is, say, for example, $950. The person looks up on Google, AI comes in, ChatGPT comes in, and it's saying that the median price is $970, for example. They'll go, do you really know what you're talking about? This says $970, you're saying $950. So nowadays, the use of data is actually quite precarious because of that accessibility and also the need for consistency. And you can't really blame the consumer, because they are going to depart with a large chunk of their wealth and a large chunk of their money, right? And so they want to have the most accurate data possible. And so the use of data has definitely changed because of that accessibility, because how easy it is for people to find out information and the need for consistent information.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions down below, but how can agents appear as specialists when that data is pretty much available everywhere? And how can they deal with customers challenging them?
That's a really good question. So the way that I see it is that to become a specialist means that you have to know different data points. You have to have a holistic approach to the data. That it's not just about, for example, the median price is $9.50. Right? It's also about, well, what has been the growth in the past 12 months, in the past 5 years, 7 years, 10 years? How has that particular suburb or area have actually grown throughout that time? How did it survive, for example, or how did it become even better over that time? Did it still grow during the cash rate hikes when it happened in 2022? Right? So it's not just about knowing one specific data, price or growth. It's actually about knowing all of the data points that will impact someone's decision to go into that market. So things like, yes, of course, price. Yes, of course, growth. But then, because that's what is, that's the snapshot. But then why did it become that? And then if you're trying to convince someone, which is basically what you're trying to do as agents, right? You're trying to convince someone to get into that market. Where is that place going to go? What other developments are slated for that area? If you're talking to an investor, what is the rental returns? What is the vacancy rate of that particular area? So actually having the knowledge of, very in-deep knowledge of that area is what's going to help you as an agent. Not just to know this is the price, but it's also knowing, well, what is the demographics like? Who's been buying here recently? What is the investment analysis like? What is about to happen in the area? Is there any big infrastructure projects? Any commercial projects? Is there going to be 30 new houses being created in the area, right? So actually having all of those, and, there's a lot of other data that can be a little bit not fuzzy, but it can kind of, as agents, we're all very busy people, that can kind of like make you lose focus a little bit because, there's information everywhere. But the top sort of like data that you need to know to become that specialist is actually the things that I've just said, where you can able to touch on all of those touch points, right?
Which brings me to my next question. There's plenty of data out there.
Oh, yeah.
And agents are pretty much time poor.
Yeah.
How do you keep up with that ever-changing data? And how do you not, mix up all of these numbers? Like, what are some of the strategies?
So my strategy, or the way that I've always trained agents from a research perspective, is to be very clear about which are your farm areas and which are not, right? Because I do see a lot of agents trying to cover a lot of ground and then, like you said, mixing up the data.
Yeah.
Like maybe the rental yield on the right side versus the left side of where the office is completely different. And because you're trying to cover so much area that you mix it all up. And, I'm guilty of it too. There'll be times where I go, oh, no, that's the rental yield for that other suburb. It's not this suburb,
Fair enough. There's plenty.
I know, right? And as someone who has a national role, who does look at the data in every suburb in the country, my advice have always been be very clear about which suburbs or which postcodes or area, whatever you want to call it, are your focus specialist area. Because it's great knowing what's happening as a rounder, like, for example, knowing what's going to happen to cash rate, because that impacts everybody. That's an economic indicator. Or, if there might be an election coming up, or if the state government where you're located is about to have a new law, right? Those are not generic, but those are sort of like overarching information that you definitely need to know, and it definitely need to stay in your background, but you are time poor. You don't have every day, every hour, the way that I do as a researcher to always keep up to date with every single data point. So it's about being clear as to which is your area and focus on those areas and making sure that you know these are the key indicators that I need to know. I need to know the current price. I need to know the growth in the past 12 months, 5 years, 10 years. I need to know what's the current rental yield. I need to know what's the current vacancy rate. Have they been going up or down? I need to know what sort of developments are about to enter the market. And I need to know, other things that you might think is very important to your market, right? And when you have that list of indicators, then it becomes easy to update on like a 3 months or a 6 months basis, because you might have an Excel sheet where you've got all of those key indicators set out.
And I think that's very interesting because they do depend on the markets you are based in and the markets you are either, selling in or buying in if you are a buyer agent. How can you then leverage, especially for real estate agents, how can you leverage those knowledge and that data to, basically gain an edge on your competitors, to basically have more listings or, we are definitely in a low stock market. So having more listings is kind of like
a challenge right now,
exactly.
Right? It's a challenge right now, especially because most of Australia, I would argue, is undersupplied.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and especially in a place where, and again, this of course depends on your local area, but there are definitely some areas where there's more real estate offices than there are houses and townhouses and units to be sold. So other than personal relationships and, all of that kind of thing being taken out of the equation, it's two things. One, the completeness of your data, and two, your ability to use that data to create a story and tell that story. Because at the end of the day, data, many people say data is power, information is power, information builds trust, all of that kind of sayings. Like we've heard that so many times. I would argue that data is data. The median house price is $950, it'll be $950. The rental yield's 3.8, it's 3.8. But it's more about the story that you then can create using those data points to convey that to a person and be passionate and knowledgeable and authoritative in your storytelling. For example, the median price currently is $950. It has come a long way for the past 10 years where it was about $650, 10 years back. There's been XYZ infrastructure development that has happened. Demographics has increased by this many percent. This is what's about to happen in the next 5 years. There's going to be a new hotel, a new subway, a new KFC, and there isn't going to be a lot of apartments or a lot of houses being built. So that's why the rental market has been going up, rental yields been going up, vacancy rates being low. And we're in a suburb right now that if you compare it to Sydney, for example, where, the median house price is 1.5, 1.6, but their rental yield is only 2.7. We're more affordable here and our rental yield is 3.8. So it's actually creating, and by the way, I don't know what suburb that is. I literally just made up a story, like on the spot. But having all of those data points and being able to actually intertwine them together into that storytelling and then being able to convey that to someone, that is where the leverage is. And actually, we're in this sort of like tech world, right? Where people do the whole text messaging thing, the chat thing, all that kind of stuff. To me, that's all and good if you already have a relationship with them. But nothing really beats actually talking to that person face to face.
Yeah.
kind of like this podcast.
Yeah.
We've done podcasts together where I might come via Zoom or, I might come via phone or, all of that kind of thing. But it still doesn't beat right now me being in your studio and recording the podcast face to face. It's the same thing with agents who actually dedicate that time to sit down with their potential clients and do that listing presentation, not only having all of the data and all of the other paperwork in a nice presentation folder that you can then leave with the client, right? Because that's part of your professionalism as an agent. But the added bonus on that is knowing your data and being able to storytell that data.
Like, I'm guessing at the, in addition of like the storytelling part, which is, like kind of like one of the key components when you're trying to, like either gain a listing or sell a house. I feel like by, taking the time to like showcase the data, it also allows your customers to ask questions.
Oh, definitely. A lot of the times I always encourage my agents to have a report with them that they can walk through the person, right? Because, everyone interprets things differently. And like I said, if you just Google something, you can get a different amount and all that kind of stuff, right? And it becomes noisy. But actually having a report that is specific and local to that postcode or to that area, that is literally like a golden tool for you. Because it's not just about, for example, if we're talking about the whole of, say, Newcastle local government or the whole of Sydney or the whole of the northwest of Sydney. We're not just talking about kind of like bigger, like higher level data. What I'm talking about here is actually for all of those indicators that I've listed, actually knowing that for your specific suburb, for your specific postcode, and having a report that is specifically just on your postcode or just on that suburb and walking your potential client through it. So not like a generic report that you might have taken from somewhere else or, media clippings or, anything like that that's kind of like around the area or any capital city or just, generic reports kind of thing, but actual specific local suburb or postcode level report.
Yeah, definitely. And that's in the end will help make a difference. Now, data can be complicated, Asti. Like, honestly, if you're new and you're starting your journey as a real estate agent, or even if math is not your thing, data can be complicated to understand and to interpret.
Absolutely.
What's your tips there into like making it more digestible in a way?
Yeah. So this is what I tell to all of my agents and also like anyone who's starting out in real estate, right? If possible, like for us at PRD, being their chief economist, I do run research masterclasses for all of the agents. And that means I do break down every single piece of data, whether it's average vendor discount and what that means in that current market, how to read graphs, even just the basic how to read graphs, the difference between pie charts and bar graphs and a line graph and whether it's up, down, what does it mean to talk to your client about. So, I run research masterclasses, obviously for the PRD brand, being their chief economist. So if you are a real estate agent that can have access to a research class or a research training or, data training or anything like that within your own network, then that is definitely something that you need to invest your time into. Or if you don't have that and you're a new real estate agent, there are so many like research classes that you can enroll yourself into that a lot of other like Property Council of Australia runs them. The Real Estate Institute of your local state runs them. You know, like how to actually read some of those data, the graphs, interpret them, and what it means to clients. Or you can ask your principal, you know, can you please sit down with me and talk to me about the trends and what does this number mean and how do I talk to clients, you know, things like that. But a lot of the time is whenever I see new real estate agents about to start is I always say, I know that winning listings is your main thing, right? That's like the big money's there, you know, like door knocking, getting your listing, you know, all of that. That's where the money is, right? But for you in the low supply market where you are in competition with others, invest the time to actually attend a research masterclass or a data class or something along those lines, right? Invest the time into if there's a keynote or an event where someone's about to go through what's been happening in the property market, you know? Because sometimes, you know, there's bodies that will run that. You know, like, you know, there's an event and it's talking about the latest trends in the market or what have you, you know. So actually investing the time to go to those events so that you can learn a little bit more about what is the data, how is the data created, and what does it mean that you can then take to your clients. So I would definitely say that's, you know, a starting point to actually understanding the data, because not everybody...
It's hard.
It's hard.
It is hard.
It is hard. There's been times, Emilie, I kid you not, where I would even bang my head on the, you know, going, wait a minute, that doesn't quite make sense, because if the data is telling me X, this should be the outcome, but it's not. Where did the data go wrong, right? I've had those moments myself, and you know, economics and data and graphs is my jam. It's my thing, you know. and so for someone who is not, it can literally be, like I always say it can literally be like as if it's a bowl of soup with all of the different ingredients and you're trying to make sense of the soup.
Yeah.
Right?
It is difficult, and it does take time to really master and understand. What's the role of your principal or even your colleagues in terms of helping you, you know, understand the data and the sharing of information? How can, you know, like agencies basically gather together and conquer together rather than dividing? And share that knowledge to make it more, I would say, easier for people, but also less time consuming?
Yes. So again, it depends on each agency, you know, on how they work, right? Whether they're individual or a network, you know, there's all sorts of different agencies out there. But if you are in a place where, you know, you're not an independent, and you do have principals, you do have colleagues, or there might be another, you know, the same brand as you, but like in another state, or the same brand as you, but like, you know, working kind of like, you know, in another area. The best thing that I can say is that if you're in an agency where there is that, is to have standardization, to actually go, okay, you know, at PRD, we do have a dedicated research department, which I head up. And so that means that it's our duty, it's part of our remit to create all of the research reports in a standardized manner for every PRD agent and every PRD office across the country. Because then when there's standardization, it makes it easier to read and understand and compare. So, you know, any of our agents are able to kind of go, okay, so there's the 10-year graph for the Gold Coast, for example. Here's the same look of a 10-year graph for Bendigo in Victoria. And here's the same look for that graph in Hobart in Tasmania. So actually having that standardization of, you know, this is what a set of data will look like for us. If it's like a one-pager thing, you know, actually having it all in that one branded, same layout, same data set, like in terms of, say, for example, there's 6 key indicators, right? Price growth, current pricing, rental yield, vacancy rate, development, for example, just 5. If that's being put into like one page, for example, having that standard page for all of the agents or having that standard page for all of the offices within the network, that will really help that collaborativeness, because you're not talking different templates. You're not talking where one has a 3-pager thing of a data and another person has one, and you know what I mean? Like one person is reporting only on this and the other person is not, and all of that kind of stuff, right? Because then otherwise it'll almost be like all is individualized, and it's hard to help someone else who is talking about a different kind of data.
Yeah.
But if there's that standardization, it makes it much easier to then compare notes, to then talk to each other and work together and actually read the data together.
Yeah, which is very interesting. We've talked about like the 5-ish principle, data
like the
that
key
agents,
data indicators. Yeah.
What are the others that agents kind of need to know still, or at least have an understanding of?
Yeah. So, the list is long.
Yes, scare the agents, yeah.
The list is long. So, in addition to what I've said, and I think I've said, what is the current price? What's the price growth like, 1 year, 5 year, 10 years, rental yield, vacancy rates, the current, incoming projects, developments into the area. You also need to know the demographics, right? You need to know what sort of buyers are you dealing with? Are you dealing more with first home buyers? Are you dealing more with younger people? Are you dealing more with, downsizers? Are you dealing more with interstate investors? Like, who are the buyers? What is the demographics and how has it been changing? Because there are many suburbs now that used to be, for example, this is very, very generalization. Perhaps the suburbs used to be old people suburb, right? And then it's had gentrification. And then now we're seeing more younger professionals and younger families and, coming into the area, right? And so, you need to know that demographic shift. You need to know what's changing in the population specific to that particular area. Obviously, you also need to know what's happening in the generic or general economy. So things like, what's happening to the cash rate? What does that mean? Whether you're a buyer, a first home owner, an investor, and where is that cash rate tracking? And everyone's eyes is on the RBA, even more so these days. I've been in my role for 12 years, right? And I've been an economist for much longer than that. I think in the past 24 months is probably the most amount of media attention, people wanting to know what is the inflation rate, what is the cash rate, what's about to happen, There's definitely been more of that interest, right? So as an agent, you need to know what is the inflation rate? What does it mean? And many agents don't know that inflation rate is basically a basket of goods of everything that we buy. Inflation rate is inclusive of house prices, fuel, electricity, holidays, alcohol, beverage, education, tourism, everything, So what is an inflation rate? And what does it mean when we say that it's going up? Where's the unemployment level at? Because the more people that is employed, then obviously the more that you're going to have increased demand for housing.
Yeah.
And so it's all of those economic items and I think because now the economy and economics items like inflation rate, cash rate is more so in the media and more so talked about, I do know that many of my agents are getting more questions about it, and sometimes it could, and sometimes, it's not even a direct real estate question of going, what's the price right now? Or, what's the yield in your particular area? There's been so many times where my agents get questions randomly at barbecues or salons or whatever of like, hey, mate, like, hey, do you know what's about to happen to the cash rate? Like, is now the time to buy or is now the time to sell?
I feel like the barbecue question is always happening to real estate agents.
And
it's
that's
like
the
a
thing.
given, yeah? Like it's a rite of passage. You need to have like those real estate questions at a barbecue.
Oh, I think like as soon as I know, for example, that as soon as I tell someone that I'm a chief economist, the next question will be, oh, so what's going to happen to interest rates? Literally the next question, right? And as soon as you say to someone, I'm a real estate agent, the number one question that comes up is, oh, I've been thinking about this. Should I buy now or should I hold off? Is there going to be higher interest rates? Like, what do I do?
Mm-mm.
And it's not always just about exact, numbers or prices or how much stock do you have. You might get the question of, oh, are you getting a lot of stock right now? But most people at that barbecue is more about, oh, is there going to be another interest rate hike? Like, what do I do with my investment property? So it's more, so it's definitely those 5 indicators that I talk about, but then also knowing about the demographics, knowing about what's happening in the economy, that will definitely help.
100%. I'm wondering, how do you communicate those data points to your existing, customers? Because it's all about relationship, but it's also all about maintaining those relationship as a real estate agent. Because, today's buyers will be tomorrow's sellers.
Yeah.
But, today's sellers might be tomorrow's buyers as well.
Yes.
So it's all about, maintaining those relationship. How do you use data to do that?
So most agencies and most real estate agents will be part of some sort of CRM. Right? They'll be part of, some sort of automated EDM or automated newsletter or something along those lines, right? The best thing that I have seen or the best thing that I can say is that regular updates through an automated channel, but still personalized to you. And when I say that, I mean, I've seen so many, because another part of this role means that I pretty much get everybody's emails, when they're sending things, right? And you see some really generic ones, like there's no personalization. You can't tell if, say, for example, that would be an email from Sam from Ray White or that's an email from Emily at Harcourts. There's no special touch to that email. There's no special touch to that data. And it's just literally a data dump of like, here's the latest report. Blah. Here's the latest data for, I don't know, the suburb of Fitzroy, A, B, C, D, E.
Yeah.
And in any CRM system, there's always the opportunity that you can write something, that you can create a template and that will be standardized in terms of the data itself, but you can personalize it as well, where you spend a little bit of time to write, for example, dear Emily, you write a paragraph about the story of what's been happening in the area. Say you do this every 3 months, for example. This is what's happening in the area. Here are the hard facts. So that's your data point. And then you've got your sign off that is, a bit more personal, right? Because as someone who gets all these emails, I can always tell which ones are purely automated and which ones still has that personal touch with the data, with the facts. And then perhaps you might attach a report. But even then, I always say to my agents, don't just say, here's the latest report, attach it.
Yeah.
Actually read the report, right? And go, here's the latest report. Here are 5 top key findings from the report. So you might have like an opening sort of, 2-3 sentences about, hey, this is what's been happening in the market, things are blah, 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 like something local. Hope you enjoyed the Toowoomba. flower festival that happened last week, like something a little bit more personal to that area, right? We've got the latest report with some hard facts, and here is like the top 3 or top 5 key findings from that report. Because that means it shows that you've read the report, because the other thing that you don't want to happen is you simply saying, here's the report, and then someone calls you and go, hey, I'd just like to ask about this particular part of the report, or like, can I just ask about like this development in the report? And if you haven't read it,
yeah, you don't know what's been talking about, yeah.
And so actually forcing yourself to do that 5 key, 3 or 5 top key findings, because let's face it, a lot of people are busy as well, right? Yeah. So they might not have the time to read, the report. I mean, like, our research reports is the most comprehensive report that we do for a local market is just 6 pages, or there's a condensed version that's only 2 pages. But I have seen reports that is double, triple that amount, right?
And let's be honest, nobody has time to read that much data.
No. And so, you got to help your clients too, because then they can go, okay, so if I do want to read the whole shebang, here it is, it's attached. But here are the top 3 or 5 key findings that is part of that email. And you've done that. You've extracted that because you're helping your client and you're helping yourself. Like I said, if they suddenly call about the report, you know what's in the report. And you can then personalize it, and then you can then automate the sending part. So I think, it's that. And the best agents that I've seen have these things scheduled. And it's scheduled, and it's not random, ad hoc, on-off situation, because clients love consistency. They like, and if you're going to establish trust and you're going to establish yourself as a specialist, consistency is the most important thing here to win someone, right? And so they'll know that in every 3 months, they'll get a report from ASTI about the local area.
And I guess, like even as a buyer, as an investor, especially for investors, you do want to keep track of your property and the way it grows and how much, equity you can leverage later down the road. And you just want to make sure that this property performs. So having an agent that basically chew it for you makes it so much easier. I'm curious about how, on an agency level, how does, having a deep understanding of your local area helps you to actually optimize your team capacity, maybe grow your team or reduce it? How does that impact your agency on that level?
So the way that can help you is there's another part of data, right? What we've been talking about is market data, right? So like, what's happening in the real estate market, how many houses, et cetera, et cetera. But there's another part of data that I call business data. And that's the part where we talk about, okay, so maybe you have 6 farm areas for your office, for that agency office. Well, out of those 6 farm areas, which ones are actually performing? Which ones are actually getting us listings or sales, or that there's actually stock there for us to even compete? Or if that market is saturated and we don't need to worry about that farm area anymore and we can prospect in another farm area. So business data needs to also be protected and also needs to be rich. And when I say business data, I don't just mean, our office is doing X amount of sales. No, I mean also, who are all of your competitors? How many sales are they doing? What's their average day on the market? What's their median price or average sale price for, the most common stock in the area, if it's 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms houses? Like what's their performance level? And how are you benchmarked against that performance level, right? And we run this for most of our PRD agencies. We run kind of like, okay, so this is your farm area. This is what's been happening in that suburb. This is your benchmark. How are you actually performing against that? And that can really help kind of figure out where your resources should be. Because if there's another area, like I said, that is saturated where there's too much competition and not enough stock anyway, and there's another area that could service your business better, then it makes sense to kind of, move away from one farm area to another and actually pull your resources in that way. And so actually having that benchmark data that is set, that all of your agents know about, that is updated regularly, that is what can drive your team, because you can go, hey guys, come on. This is where the benchmark is. This is where we're currently performing. What are you doing in terms of your processes? How are you structuring your day? How many door knocks are you doing? How much, are you utilizing the marketing team in terms of social media post? Are you giving them information about the market? Not everybody has a dedicated research team, right? But you can still create, a flyer with information about what's happening in the area. So are you all doing that? And actually using that to kind of go, all right, are we on the benchmark? Are we below the benchmark? Or are we doing great? Right? And actually being able to, I guess, stimulate your agents from that perspective, but then also as a business decision as to, all right, do we still farm in this market? Or do we move somewhere else? Do we, kind of put our resources somewhere else? So as a principle, it's not just about market data that is important. It's also about business data that is very key as well.
Yeah, which is very interesting, because you wouldn't, when you talk about data, you just think about the traditional data in a way, the classic ones. What other data do principal and, offices need to take into consideration on whether or not they will scale their operations?
I mean, obviously, you've got your performance type data, like key performance indicators and things like that. Of course, you've got your profit and loss type of data. You've got all of those sort of accounting type data, right? But you also need to know your demographics data as well. You also need to know what is your development data, what is coming into the pipeline, and how can you actually target those. A lot of the times, like you say, data is median price, and it's not, right? Data is basically information about all types of different things. And as a principle, it can get very, very noisy on what sort of data do you need to have. Yes, you need your business KPI data, you need your accounting data, you need your human resource data. You also need to know about the market data, and like I say, your demographics and economics data. So there's a lot of different data sets out there that a principal needs to know. And whenever someone asks me, how do I manage all of that, which is, it's a lot of data.
It is, yeah.
It's a lot of data, right? For me, what I always advise my principals is not only, it comes to what I call data discipline. So actually knowing, for example, if you are an Excel person, right? Knowing that this folder is for KPI data, all of the Excel sheets are named, they're all, color coded, they're all updated. There's another folder for market data, for example. There's another folder for accounting data. So actually being that data diligent it is such a skill, and it is such a difficult skill to conquer as well, because I kid you not, there's been times where I have gone to my team saying, what was the latest quarterlies, that thing that I was talking about yesterday?
And it's hard to remember everything.
It's hard to remember everything, right? And so that data discipline, that is the key when it comes to dealing with data. Because like I said, data can be noisy.
Definitely. Where are we going next with data in the industry?
My goodness.
What's going to happen? Like, is AI going to take over eventually? You mentioned earlier on that sets are changing like often, and the data that we are interested by are also changing quite often. So where are we going next with data?
This is it is actually a really hard question, because the provision of data changes quite often, right? And there's so many companies that will tell you that they can provide you better data or more complete data or more up-to-date live data. All right. As a real estate agency, we get approached all the time by people saying, oh, we can provide you better data. Or we can get you, much wider access. Or you can combine XYZ data and actually get a much better result, right? And that's, at a principal level, at an agency level. In research, I get asked all the time, we have this product, would you use it? We have this other product, would you use it? For me, data is going to be delivered even more so on available platforms across different types of mediums. I don't think I was going to say this, but sometimes you see data being released on TikTok.
Yeah.
You see data being released as a meme.
Yeah.
You see data being released as an info. Like, I thought that, infographics is still a thing, but apparently infographics on TikTok look different these days.
Yeah.
I'm showing my age, I think. But,
I don't even have TikTok.
Oh, mate. The only reason why I know about TikTok is obviously because I have young children, right?
Yeah.
And I have teenage kids as well. And so
you have to know.
I have to know about these things, And I know that there's the use of, we do have a lot of real estate agents using social media, TikTok, all of that kind of stuff, right? And so as someone who provides data, the way that I've had to provide data have really, really changed because people's attention span is not what it used to be. And there's a reason why a lot of our research market update reports are just 2 pages, because it's literally bang, bang, bang. It's those key indicators that I talk about being presented in like a standardized way across the network. So the simpler that you can make the data actually is definitely how data is going to be delivered more. Now, I will say this though. There's a very big difference between simple data and sensationalism data, right? Simple data is basically giving you the facts and figures, etc., in a way that is simple to understand.
Yeah.
Sensationalized data is cherry picking data and blowing it up on social media. Those are 2 completely different, because someone might say to me, oh, we just want to put one graph out or one figure out and make it simpler. But is it simple or is it sensationalism?
Yeah, you need context.
You need the context, right? And what I'm seeing now is that use data as an opener. So provide, like I said, those key findings in a clear, simple manner and invite people to actually then engage with you, because then that will be the opportunity for you to storytell. But that's based on simplifying complex data. Sensationalism might get you the calls and what have you, but if you can't back it up, if you don't know the full context or the full story, then you're going to lose credibility. So you have to be very careful between those 2.
Well, I think we couldn't end it on better wise word, Asti. Thank you so much for joining us today on this real estate business episodes podcast. We will be back next week with another episode. In the meantime, join us on our social media and bye for now.